Hisoka is finally back again, except this time it's actually him. In this chapter, we've also solved the mystery of Sarasa's killer, revealed what Chrollo is looking for aboard the Black Whale 1, found a traitor within the Chara family, as well as confirmed one of the most insane theories that this fanbase has ever conjured, and even more, because mate, this chapter, it is packed. And I've said that about every chapter since 401, but this one particularly so. And we have got far too much to cover. But to start, crazily enough, this is our first actual sighting of Hisoka aboard the Black Whale 1. We thought we saw him before, and we thought wrong. I mean, actually, we were kind of right, because I have talked about the Benolanov is Hisoka theory before on this channel, but it is insane to have a thought turn out to be the actual direction that Togashi takes the story. That almost never happens. However, there is absolutely no doubt that the person we are seeing right here is Hisoka. He looks pretty damn good in his casino dealer outfit, and his rambling in a monologue could not possibly be replicated by anyone except for Hisoka himself. And something that he touches on is the idea of the Chimera Ants, and even though he missed out on their existence, and no doubt a ton of amazing potential fight battles, he wouldn't have been interested anyway, because he's not a big fan of interspecies play. He's also not a big fan of group play, which is why even though the entire ship is being rocked by Nen rumblings, Hisoka has no interest in joining Hulkenberg's orgy, and also the fact that it was only made possible by a Nen beast, and again, Hisoka is not into animals. And so in the most Hisoka way possible, he is establishing himself as a vanilla hopeless romantic, someone who's only interested in a monogamous one-on-one relationship until death do us part, which is usually fairly soon, and then it's on to the next monogamous relationship. It's a really fascinating insight into Hisoka. For most of Hunter x Hunter, I think he's been perceived as quite the loose battle whore, but he has very specific and what he describes as normal needs. He's even kind of lamenting the fact that he's so normal. I, Hisoka, am so boring. And I guess if you were to equate Nen to, physical taste, then Hisoka really is quite vanilla. He has a very simple but incredibly versatile Nen ability, and he favors similarly straightforward opponents like Gon, and I would also describe Chrollo as a straightforward opponent, because sure, he can use multiple abilities, never quite sure what he's going to do, but they all revolve around his book. So even if Hisoka was around during the Chimera Ant crisis, as it turns out, it's funny to think that he simply would have refused to fight. He would have taken one look at the Royal Guard and gone, not my type. But I am starting to see a potentially interesting future for him, because I can't help but feel that Hisoka and Saranik would be perfect for one another. They both have an excitement-based hyperfixation on Nen combat, and I do think that Hisoka could give Saranik the proper challenge he needs, and that Saranik could satisfy Hisoka's loving neediness. Although actually, probably not, because Saranik is of course flanked by two Nen beasts. So it's practically a whole zoo. Hisoka probably has no interest there either. But you know what? I think that this is Hisoka's way of telling us that he has evolved and matured in his own way. At the beginning of Hunter x Hunter, he was definitely a lot less picky with his partners, but over time, he's discovered more of himself. He knows what he likes and more importantly, what he doesn't like. So he now has much more solid criteria when seeking a partner, which makes him a bit less of a wild card. When it comes to which side Hisoka's gonna land on, we can now predict his actions a lot more accurately so long as we're always thinking about catering to his needs. And look, we all have needs, be they physical, emotional, maybe even financial. I bring that up because I, man on the internet, fall into that third category. And that's why I use today's sponsor, Rocket Money. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. And in my case, what helps most is the easily attainable fiscal responsibility of canceling subscriptions. Because Rocket Money can identify recurring charges and cancel subscriptions with a few simple taps. You know those services you sign up for on a whim and then forget about for the rest of your life, whilst they charge a monthly fee despite the no value they provide to your life? It's almost frustratingly easy to get rid of them. Much easier than going through bank statements and trying to figure out what's going where, because they never put something easily identifiable in the description. But now I just tap all my problems away. And with these savings, Rocket Money can then analyze your spending habits to create you a custom budget, and even monitor your spending, sending very helpful alerts if you've exceeded your limits. And including me, Rocket Money has helped save its customers up to $740 a year when they use all the features, with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. So to save more and spend less, join the over 5 million people using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/NewWorldReview or click the link in the description to get started for free. And you can also unlock even more fun features with premium. So that's rocketmoney.com/NewWorldReview to get started for free. And thank you so much to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video, as well as sorting my life out, because it's partners like them that allow us to bring you the best fictional hunter content possible as often as possible. So definitely check them out. But for now, it's back to you, me, But one Hisoka is not enough in this chapter. And thankfully what we have here is some Hisoka on Hisoka action. And I think we actually need some new terminology, otherwise things are going to get very confusing. There's just so much body swapping and body transforming in this arc. So we're going to call this bad boy Hisoka because that's who he is. And this figure here is going to be Benosoka, or maybe even Hisokalanov. Actually, let's do the first one, because we need to establish a uniform naming scheme where the person who it actually is should probably take priority at the start of the name. So Benosoka it is. But what's happened here is something that longtime channel viewers should be very familiar with, because it's a theory that I've gone over a couple of times, most recently in a video from June this year. But way back in chapter 377, Benolanov revealed that he had an ability called Metamorphosin, and this allowed him to take on the appearance of others, with Chrollo more or less saying, "Bro, nice ability, I'ma need you to use it for something." And today is the day that we officially found out what the something was. But I've always been suspicious that this wasn't Hisoka, because we've never had it confirmed through Lynch's Truth Punch ability. And every time that someone asked Benosoka if he was Hisoka, he never responded. And plus there's that whole thing about Benosoka going to see The Thing in the onboard cinema, which is a movie about an organism that can imitate other organisms. It's like the pieces were all there, but if anything, this plan turned out to be even more convoluted than I thought. Because Benolanov also had to transform into both Lynch and Zakuro at certain points to make sure that this went off perfectly. But in the end, all of this has gone perfectly according to Chrollo's plan. Because in order to get who they thought was Hisoka out of the way, Henry offered Benosoka a room on tier 1, and that's where we see both Hisokas in this chapter. So firstly, mate, Hisoka managed to make it all the way to tier 1 by himself. That is a pretty ridiculous achievement, and Chrollo suspects that it probably has to do with some prince intrigue. We'll talk about that. But the fact that he's just casually hanging about on tier 1, massive achievement. And what's happening here is now very exciting, because we have Hisoka, a Phantom Troop member, and Kurapika on the same tier. Although it should be noted that the prince's quarters are separated by even more security, so the chances of them crossing paths with Kurapika isn't currently amazing. It would need to be at one of the communal events, like the banquets they hold every Sunday. But on a more morbid note, I'm a bit sad that Benolanov killed Lynch, but yeah, look, I get it. We can't have her running around knowing all of those truths. But I really liked her Nen ability, and I would have loved to see her punch more dudes. And I think that Benolanov is right to be worried about having killed Lynch, because it is surely not going to take long to discover that she's missing. But this could play out in a couple of different ways. The first possibility is that Lynch's death could be attributed to the Hale Lee family, since they're in active combat with them anyway, and that would be the best case scenario for the troop. However, it could also be discovered that the Phantom Troop killed Lynch, which would threaten Nobunaga, Feitan, and Finks' current good relations with the Mafia, which might be turning bad at the end of it. We'll get to that. Or they could even blame Hisoka and decide to fully back the troop, instead of continuing to try and play their strategy games, which at this stage, I want to be clear, they are games. The Mafia factions think they're being smart, but they're just children playing in the pen that Chrollo set up for them. Meanwhile, the truth of this situation is that Benolanov is in very real danger right now, because he's isolated from the rest of the troop, and while he's not trying to antagonize or even be noticed by Hisoka, our romantic battle clown does have a supernatural instinct for detecting, how shall we say, compatible partners. And I honestly would not be surprised if, in this situation, Benolanov ends up being the next troop member to die. But he then transforms into a face that I never expected to see again. Benolanov uses Metamorphosin to become Owl, so Benowl, I guess, one of the shadow beasts from York New City, who actually had a really fun Nen ability called the Fun Cloth. Owl himself suffered a very unfortunate fate. He got captured by the troop and then tortured by Feitan. Oh, that's not good. And then he was kept alive so that Chrollo could use the Fun Cloth ability, which he did against Silver and Xeno Zoldyck. And I believe that Benolanov has chosen Owl because one of the cool restrictions of Metamorphosin is that Benolanov can only transform into people he's met in person, and only maintain the transformation for the duration that he spent with that person, which makes Owl a very solid choice, because he was kidnapped and held in the troop hideout for God knows how long, which just happened to be where Benolanov was stationed at the time, so may as well use that time to memorize a face. And this restriction is actually quite clever, because I imagine that it's very difficult for Benolanov to spend extended amounts of time around other people due to his appearance, as well as his notoriety as a criminal with a Class A bounty. Really, the only other solid options he has for Metamorphosin would probably be his fellow troop members, but I don't think that helps a lot with laying low, because they're all potentially even more notorious than he is. Although, I just had a particularly sinister thought, which is that Owl probably wasn't the first person that Benolanov has done this to, and that he may have kidnapped a whole series of people, kept them for a week or so, and then disposed of them so that he could use their bodies without fear of time running out. But the head of the spider, Chrollo Lucifer, also appears in a magnificent single page of this chapter, and Togashi was absolutely relentless with the assault of narrative bombshells targeting this casual appearance. Firstly, Chrollo hasn't been seen since chapter 377, so I'd very much like to welcome him back into our lives because we haven't had the pleasure of his company since 2018. Secondly, he's walking away from a man being featured on a big screen who you may not recognize, but this is huge because we saw this guy in chapter 396. He was one of Sarasa's kidnappers, and he's immediately recognizable because he has about 5 million distinctive facial features. And I think that this does finally close the book on the Sarasa mystery because this feature being played states that he was brutally murdered a decade ago. And I think the implication is that this brutal murder was the result of the Phantom Troop who finally found him, meaning that very sadly the troop have probably all watched Sarasa's murder tape. But this is also a case where Togashi's nihilism is coming through in full force again because apparently this dude was the chairman of a foundation dedicated to children, and that sends an indescribable sickening feeling into my stomach because you just know that that whole organization was a front to pick and choose kids to kill on camera. Look, whatever the troop did to him, and it's not going to be good, rest assured, he probably died in the most horrible way that a Hunter x Hunter character could die, but even then, what they did to him wasn't enough. And I would be remiss not to mention that we saw the face of one other man in this flashback who kidnapped Sarasa, who is almost guaranteed to be Saradnik's tattoo artist because they both have these incredibly distinctive tattoo sleeves. And look, this isn't just some guy either. The tattoo artist has lingering lore elsewhere in this arc, as Borkson mentions Saradnik's tattoo artist in chapter 394, and also identifies him as a former member of the Haoli family, which is the faction that Saradnik financially supports. In summary though, this tattoo artist has a connection to the Fourth Prince, he has an indirect connection to the Phantom Troop, and potentially a connection to Morena Prudhoe. Because there's another character in this chapter who has a surprise Morena connection, we'll get to that. But the tattoo artist is another of about 1 billion characters that Togashi keeps weaving into and coming back to in this arc, so just don't forget about him. He could end up being weirdly relevant. But the reason why the Sarasa mystery is solved here is to link it to Hisoka's action of killing Sharnak and Kortopi. Not that we needed a huge refresher after the Uvagin incident, but it's reminding us of the lengths that the troop will go to in order to take revenge on someone who takes something away from them, very in keeping with the Meteor City motto. Meanwhile, Nobunaga, Finks, and Feitan are now all the way back down on tier 5 there at the Chara office. And this is where Nobunaga shows us the difference between a Nen veteran and a bunch of amateurs, because he, with a horrific amount of accuracy, describes the goal of the Haoli family, as well as the Nen mechanism that they're using to achieve it. And this may or may not also be because there's a parallel drawn between the Haoli family and the Phantom Troop in this chapter, something showing us that these two organizations may have very similar thought patterns, which isn't surprising because as much as we love them, or I guess as much as I love them, the troop have done some pretty horrible stuff in the past, and the idea of sacrificing the innocent for personal gain is very much on the agenda for them. So Nobunaga figures out their plan by putting himself in their shoes. He asks himself, why would we, the Phantom Troop, do this? And then it just clicks. But in addition to underboss Kenny Wang, the man they're speaking to is named Tajal. And we've met him before. He's the vice boss of the Chara family. So Tajal, he has a very unique role. He exists as a bit of an intermediary between the Chara family and Prince Luzurus, because Tajal is also Luzurus's official military advisor for his private army. And I know it's yet another dude to add to the pile of dudes, but definitely keep this guy in mind as well. He's incredibly smart and not someone we want against us. However, I have a terrible feeling that he may already be leaning that way, or that he's going to be betrayed by Kenny Wang imminently, because he has a very revealing inner monologue stating that Morena may need to act sooner than expected. And this isn't just tactical speculation. Oh, my enemy Morena may need to act because we are doing fun things. From what he's saying and how he's saying it, Kenny Wang is 99% working with Morena. But of course, we could also have a double twist where Tajal is also working for the Haoli family, because this chapter ends with him rather suspiciously leading the Phantom Troop down a dark corridor, and they're all quite shocked at what they see at the end. Now, I don't know how likely this is, but what if what the troop are seeing are the 3 Haoli members that we saw on that same page? And Tajal has essentially led them into a section of the ship designed for the purpose of being slaughtered and farming more levels. Because the 3 Haoli members that we do see are no joke. Their names from left to right are Morel, Damon, and Tevalares, and each of them are now a level 51 in the Contagion game, meaning that they've long since developed their Nen abilities, which manifest at level 20, and then on top of that they have a whopping 51 levels of aura boost granted to them, and they're all just over halfway to becoming member zeros of their own, because at level 100 they gain the ability to infect 22 more people and invite them to play the Contagion game as well. And I gotta say, these guys are no longer a joke at this point. Previous interactions with the Hailey family have been a bunch of people in the 20 to 30 level range, very much novice Nen users, not used to their abilities. However, with these level 50s, we're now reaching the point where inexperience can be made up for with raw power, much like how the Chimera Ants function. And they're not even the most powerful members currently, because Togashi also gives us a short scene of Dogman, who is level 62, and as wacky as he looks, he's being set up for big things. And I also love that he has very gimmick appropriate Nen ability that allows him to smell whether or not a person knows Nen, and even which affinity of Nen user they are within a certain distance. A lot of people might be a bit underwhelmed by that ability, but this is insane, because one of the biggest struggles in Nen combat is figuring out your opponent's affinity. Once you know what they are, you can take a look at their ability and you can form a vague idea of exactly what they can do, and more importantly, what they're weak against. And given that Dogman is a level 62 enhancer, if you give him any sense of what you're weak against, I can't help but feel like this dude is going to obliterate you. And it looks like we're going to see what he's truly capable of during Prince Hulkenberg's funeral procession, which I didn't even think about. It is such a stupidly perfect time for the Hailey family to act, because hundreds, if not thousands, probably thousands of people are going to be gathered at the central staircase on every level to pay their respects as the coffin goes up. And this funeral could be a massacre that instantly levels up the entire family to 100 and spreads the contagion to almost 200 more people. And that's the point where I become more afraid of the Hailey family than anything happening on tier 1. Princes, the guardian spirit beasts, the everything, because with the Chimera Ants, we have seen what happens when a problem like this isn't stopped at inception. And if they succeed at whatever their plan is during the funeral procession, then I think that's the kind of problem we're going to be dealing with again. But to enact this plan, apparently the Hailey need to recruit a certain person, which is one of 3 tantalizingly unanswered questions that this chapter presents us with. Another of which is the speculation that Hisoka himself is actually in contact with the Prince of the Kakin Empire, and that's how he made his way on board and all the way up to tier 1 of the Black Whale. Realistically, Hisoka is a licensed hunter, so he could have applied for one of the bodyguard jobs, but there are other explanations, and I have my eye on one prince in particular. However, the question that I want answered most has to do with the revelation that Chrollo is looking for a Nen ability aboard the Black Whale 1, an ability needed to finally kill Hisoka and ensure that he won't come back. And that ability could be one that we already know quite well. There's a lot of possibilities aboard the ship that could fit that purpose, and we're going to explore all of them, as well as Hisoka's prince and the Hailey mystery target in the next video.